team? It's your boy D Neal back with another reaction video, guys. Here we are with Do You Believe in Miracles? Story of the 1980 U.S. hockey team, part 2. I'm ready to dive right back in. Before we do, make sure you subscribe to the channel, ring notification bell, hit a video a thumbs up so it gets suggested. Oh, you got it!
A game like that and disgrace their abilities or our collective efforts.
No one knows exactly how many Herbies were done that night, but to the players, it was a turning point.
That moment probably had more to do with us gelling as a team, feeling like we were a group, a family. We looked at each other and said, you know, basically he can do anything he wants to us. He's not going to break us.
Returning from
I
Europe,
love that.
the team continued its grueling schedule of competition in the United States, and they went on a tear, winning 30 of their 41 games through the fall of 1979.
Dang!
Around Christmas time, we played in a pre-Olympic tournament in Lake Placid. We played the Russian national B team, who were pretty darn good.
And the Americans beat the Soviet junior varsity team 5-3, winning the tournament and gold medals to go with it.
Hey!
But the smiles on their faces hid an uneasy feeling on the team, because despite all the wins, Herb Brooks wasn't satisfied.
I didn't like our team then. I didn't like the chemistry of our team.
And since only 20 players were allowed on the Olympic roster, there were still 6 cuts to come. Brooks was making it clear that no one was safe, not even the team captain.
2 weeks before the Olympic Games, he calls me and he's going to cut me from the team. You're not good enough. You shouldn't be here. I never should have taken you.
Oh my God!
And I'm thinking, he might just do this. You know, I'm like, wow.
The word got down that Ruzioni's job was in jeopardy. So everyone said, if he'll cut the captain, where do I stand?
Which was exactly what Brooks wanted.
Of course.
Turning the screws even tighter, he was bringing in new players for tryouts just weeks before the Olympics.
Oh wow!
Provoking the same fear in his players that Brooks himself experienced in 1960 when he was cut from the Olympic team at the last minute. But this was a new generation of player, and they'd had enough.
And I said, you know, Herb, I don't think you should do it. I think it's wrong. We're going to Lake Placid in a week. I mean, stop it. Get rid of these guys and let us get serious about this.
And I was looking for that moment where their cohesiveness and strength of association was such a strong bond, and then I would just cut the cord, and that was the moment.
Brooks sent the late additions back home. He trimmed the roster to 20 and kept his captain.
Herb never did anything on a whim. He planned. And I think he felt like that maybe this was the last test to see how close these players really are.
I'm sure Herbie walked away from that and said, you know, maybe we got a shot.
Dang. Herbie, it sounded like Herbie just like to instill fear. Like, y'all jobs to never say. Herbie didn't give out compliments, it seems like. Didn't give out any compliments. Herbie was just like, y'all suck. You're terrible. You're playing worse every day. And right now you're looking like you're playing in the next month or something like that. Herbie was just, I guess he was tearing them down. But I guess to build them up, I mean, it worked. It worked, so you can't complain about it.
The team was finally set, and their confidence was building, thanks to an outstanding 42-15-3 record against world-class competition. But before the Olympics, the Americans had one more test to take. On February 9th, 1980, at Madison Square Garden in New York City, they skated onto the ice to play a fundraising exhibition game, just 3 days before the start of the Olympics. But to their opponents on this night, it wasn't just an exhibition. Because anytime the Soviet Union's top team played against Americans, they played to win. The Soviets had just recently embarrassed the NHL All-Stars in a 3-game series, winning the Challenge Cup on American ice.
Did he say the NHL All-Stars? Embarrassed? So they wasn't playing the All-Star, the National Hockey League, the professionals. All-Stars in that league. Embarrassed them. Okay.
With the Olympics only days away, they were rolling over opponents like a red tidal wave.
They were the Red Menace, and they wore the CCCP across their chests, and they were very, very intimidating.
You had heard about them. You'd known how good they were. You'd known about their successes. And now you were going to play them. And that night it was welcome to the real world, boys.
God dang!
We got crushed, and we thought, these guys are in another world.
They just kicked us around that rink. The goals they scored were, you could have filmed them.
Oh my
They're
God!
like robots. When they scored a goal, they never smiled. I don't think I ever saw them smile.
We were about ready to stand up and applaud him because we didn't see anything like that. Did you see that goal? Did you see his move? It's like we were spectators.
God dang!
It might as well have said 20-0. 10-3 made it sound closer than it was. It was no contest.
There couldn't have been a greater low point given the preparation and the work that we had put in. It was very demoralizing.
This dose of hockey reality brought U.S. hopes back to earth.
And Herbie probably wanted them to go through that. Knowing Herbie, he probably wanted that to happen.
As each team left New York City for upstate Lake Placid, their futures seemed clear.
Anybody who left Madison Square Garden that day thought to themselves, the Soviets will win every game in the Olympics, take home the gold medal, and never be challenged. And the U.S., all you knew is that when it came time to face the big bear, they had no chance.
As discouraging as the loss to the Soviets was, it was not something heavy on the minds of Americans. Throughout 1979, as the hockey team was preparing to compete in the Olympics, Americans at large were also competing with the harsh realities of everyday life.
Look at the economy. Look how much money we're paying for gas. Inflation was absolutely ridiculous.
Wow.
People just didn't feel good about the United States. A lot of people wondered where we were headed.
And then in November, just when things seemed like they couldn't get worse,
This is NBC Nightly News
they did.
with Jessica Savage.
Good evening. The American embassy in Tehran is in the hands of Muslim students tonight. Spurred on by an anti-American speech by the Ayatollah Khomeini, they stormed the embassy and took dozens of American hostages.
On November 4th, which was a really rainy day, 100 or so Iranian students climbed over the walls of the U.S. Embassy, yelling,
Oh my God.
death to America. In a few seconds, the door was knocked down, and Iranians with automatic weapons stood right in front of me and held them against my head.
This morning, for the first time since the hostages were put under lock and key, one of the captives, blindfolded, was brought out into the open.
He is Harry Rosen, the embassy's press
Wow.
Barry Rosen and 51 other Americans would be held hostage in Iran for the next 444 days.
My
We were
God.
bound hand and foot with guards in our room, weren't permitted to speak at all. You do not see a day of sunlight. They would come into our cells and hold us up against the wall and use an automatic weapon and count from 10 to 1 just to scare us.
The defining moment of the late 70s for Americans was the hostage crisis in Iran. Here we couldn't do anything to help these people who were being held hostage by these radicals. Americans were intensely frustrated by this.
Carter tries to frighten us on the economic front. He does not have the military courage to attack us.
It was a constant nightly embarrassment to all Americans to see our influence in the world seemingly ebbing away.
Wow.
Every night on the evening news, they'd burn an American flag for us. We were not feeling very good about ourselves.
In December,
That is insane. I did not know about this story at all. That's so scary.
Even worse.
Day 54 in Iran, and while there has been no significant change in the hostage situation, there has been a major development in the country next door to Iran, Afghanistan.
During the last 3 days, more than 5,000 Soviet combat troops have been airlifted into Kabul. Up to another 50,000 Soviet troops have massed along Afghanistan's northern border. As one administration official said privately, this is the grossest piece of international behavior in some time.
The period after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan was one of the tensest periods of the entire Cold War. It was always a potentially dangerous situation that, if it ever had gotten out of control, would have meant the end of the world as we knew it.
It's very important for the world to realize how serious a threat the Soviets' invasion of Afghanistan is.
So serious that President Carter's response put the entire world on alert.
We instituted draft registration, we escalated the defense budget, and we called upon the world to boycott the Summer Olympics in Moscow.
When Carter announced the boycott, it was one more thing that seemed to be adding to the national sense of malaise, is that now our team's not going to go either? Because we have no other way of convincing the Russians to leave Afghanistan?
But in the world of superpower chess, Carter's threat to boycott the Summer Games in Moscow led to speculation of a Soviet countermove, that perhaps they would launch their own boycott of Lake Placid. But with the Olympics just days away, the Soviets decided to fight it out on the playing fields of America. The Cold War was getting colder by the day, and incentive would not be a problem for the Soviet athletes.
Newspapers were full of articles like blaming Americans for everything. So, and the attitude for the entire Olympic team, let's show them who we are. Let's show them who are the greatest. Let's show them who are the strongest, and let's show them on their soil.
Dang. The Winter Olympics began on February 12th, 1980, day 100 of the hostage crisis. As the Soviet Union's athletes marched in the opening ceremonies, the Soviet Army continued its own march across Afghanistan.
Jimmy Carter had said that unless the Russians were out of Afghanistan in February, the boycott was on. So this cloud was hanging over these games.
International tension wasn't the only problem affecting the Winter Games. As athletes and fans descended on the tiny village of Lake Placid in New York's Adirondack Mountains, the transportation system broke down.
Oh,
Buses
wow.
often weren't available, and thousands spent hours stranded in the cold.
That's crazy.
America's crisis of confidence seemed to be reaching its peak.
The Lake Placid Games did not start out with the spirit of optimism and success. It looked like yet another opportunity for us to get kicked in the teeth in the way in which we seem to be all over the map.
Nobody felt good. Nobody.
Yeah, I would have. The way the Russians kicked their butt the first time, I don't know how they pulled it
We
off.
felt proud, and we come along.
Well, right now, I think the Russians are the greatest hockey team in the world. I think we can objectively say that by the teams they've beaten. Historically speaking, you have to look at the Czechs and the Swedes as favorites for the silver and bronze medals. After that, it's the United States, the West Germans, the Canadians, and the Finns, teams that all have a chance for an upset.
No one was expecting a showdown between the Americans and the Soviets. The teams were in separate brackets and would play only if each got to the medal round. The Soviets were expected to be there. The Americans weren't.
I know you guys are really facing a Herculean task here. It's like sending you into the lion's cage. Do you feel like that?
Yes, we do. You know, you got to be realistic about things. We're a young team. We're the youngest Olympic hockey team ever. If you had to pick us, I think it would probably be picked fifth.
We were anticipating getting the gold medals because we were the strongest team. The Czech team wasn't very strong. The Swedes weren't strong either. The Americans never really counted as an opponent.
Dang.
Therefore, there was nobody really to compete with.
The Soviets barely had to compete in the early rounds, as they breezed past Japan and the Netherlands by a combined score of 33-4.
My
The
God.
Americans opened against heavily favored Sweden, and playing a nervous and tentative game, trailed 2-1 late in the final period.
I remember the U.S. had several opportunities to tie the game, and you just got the feeling, and of course, as the clock ticks down and now you're under a minute, well, it's not to be.
With only 41 seconds
Wow.
left, Brooks pulled Jim Craig from the goal, putting an extra skater on the ice, but leaving the American net empty. It was a desperate move for a desperate team.
Fighting for control of the puck with 29 seconds to play. Baker on it, right!
Wow.
He was just trying to get it on net. And I couldn't believe it when it went in, you know.
Wow.
I wonder if Billy doesn't score, what happens to the hockey team? Well, Billy did score.
And the Americans in the key game. In the first round, tie it up.
That was the biggest goal of the Olympics, because if the Americans lose that game, they're virtually out of contention before the Olympic Games start.
That's crazy.
The U.S. 2 and Sweden 2.
2 days later, the Americans faced Czechoslovakia, underdogs again, in a game they had to win.
Many people said that the Czechs were considered the second best team in the world and the only team that had a chance to beat the Soviets. Well, we pretty much dominated the Czechs.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Late in the third period, as the Americans were skating to a 7-3 victory, Mark Johnson was knocked to the ice from a cheap shot by a Czechoslovakian player.
The injured American player right there, number 10, Mark Johnson.
As Johnson lay injured, Americans watching on television were introduced to Herb Brooks, up close and personal.
Bury that goddamn stick right in your throat. Herb Brooks. It was really a glorious moment. Very upset. Eat that goddamn go-home 3.
If you're going to do something to our guy, I'm going to take this stick and I'm going to stuff it down your throat. People.
Hey, Herb ain't play that. Herb ain't play that. He said, don't do that. Nah, but that's all we got for this part. I didn't know, like, American moral. Free. Not morals. Morality? What is the word that I'm looking for? I would say spirits. American spirits were at such an all-time low. The influence of America was at an all-time low. I didn't know any of that. That's crazy. So I can't imagine if this hockey team had lost in that first round of Sweden. And it's crazy how a hockey team played such a big role in America and picking the morale up and picking spirits up. It's insane. But I can't wait to finish this. You guys got a favorite video suggestion, you can subscribe to Patreon or drop it in the comment section. Subscribe to the channel, ring notification bell, give the video a thumbs up so it gets suggested. It's your boy Neal, out.